Today we're going to have a look at TI processes that import data from a database and how they store the credentials that are used to make that connection. Now, what can happen is if we go to a process here, we get an error message that our credentials that were stored within the TI processes are no longer valid. And the reason that can happen, there's a multitude. It can be that within your database, your password is set to have an expiry, perhaps every 30, 60, 90 days, whatever the system standard is. And when that happens, you need to update the password. Now, no one is going to want to go through and do all of these individually. So there are ways around that. Potentially, we see things like when we are moving from our development to our pre-production to our production environments, we are going to be connecting to different databases in each of those that have the same structures. But when we do that, we need to provide different credentials. So again, we don't want to go through and do it all individually. So instead, traditionally, what we have done is within the process, on the prologue tab, we would have a section where we pass the information that is used to connect in. And we do that by first holding it in a simple two-dimensional control cube. And that allows us to get around this by all we would have needed to do is go into this control cube and update either the DSN, the username, or the password in one place. And as long as all of our TI processes are reading that data before they connect, it solves our problem. But there are pros and cons to this. Pro being that it's super easy. It's pretty much an industry standard nowadays and has been for well over a decade. So everyone will see this, understand it, and be able to use it. Risks, however, is this old thing that's going on here, which, as we can see, my super secret password is completely free open text that is visible for people to see and read. Now that's a risk. My username and password are visible. We can mitigate that risk by, of course, putting security access on this control cube so only certain people can see it. That will include all admins by default. So you need to know whether those admins should be able to see this or not, because they can. There's also a secondary risk of people being able to read this data in the fact that the information is stored in the data directory associated with the TM1 server. There are ways around that. So there is an option to encrypt your data directory. However, I don't see that option being used very often, which is quite surprising as it's incredibly easy to set up. But what that means is normally there's just text files that show this data stored as it is. It would require someone to understand what they are looking for in that text file, but the information is there. So this all comes down to how risk averse you are as an organization and as the individual that is managing the system. As with everything, there are risks, but you need to decide how likely that risk is to have an impact. Is there going to be someone in your organization that is going to use that information? And if so, what can they do with it? And generally it has to be within your organization because it is a file directory. So someone has to be on your network to get into it normally. And you can, of course, protect that directory as well, and you should do so. There are always going to be people within an organization that have access to the entire network if they wish to do so. But now, this is the only method we've really had, other than going through and manually updating each TI within the data source section as and when you want to. And most production systems have quite a lot of processes that are reading from a database. So personally, that's something I would never do, but some people might choose to. So our only option to automate it has essentially been to read from a control cube. So as of Workspace Release 69, which came out around October, November time, IBM did introduce another method for doing this, and it is an incredibly easy method. So as long as you're in Workspace and in Workbench, so to do this, you need to be a modeler or an administrator within Workspace, and you need to have the credentials to edit processes within the TM1 service also. But if you go to the Processes section and click the three dots that are over on the right, there's now this ODBC settings option. And when you go into that, it will show you all of the processes that have an ODBC data source type associated with them. And you can select which ones you want to change, or you can just select all of them nicely. And when we go to the edit option up here, it gives us the ability to change the DSN that is being used. It gives us the ability to change the username, and it gives us the ability to change the password associated with all of them. Now, when we change the password using this methodology, it is the same as changing the password in here. So it is stored as encrypted information. So it is potentially a more secure way of doing it than what we have traditionally done. So now we have these options, and it is a choice of which one you use going forward. Now, I have a lot of systems that are using the old methodology, and it will require a bit of effort to update them to use the new methodology. So I'm probably not going to be in a rush to do that, but certainly with greenfield developments, I'm probably going to be inclined to try and use this new option instead. And I say try simply because I am a creature of habit, and I've been using this other method for over a decade. So it is going to take some effort to just train my small little brain to do something different for a change. But having options is fantastic. And this is such a simple solution that now you see it, you are surprised that it wasn't there earlier. But here we go. Options are ours.